The kitchen smelled of burnt toast and bitter resentment. 9-year-old Amara crouched beneath the chipped wooden table, her small hands clutching her little brother, Toby, who was barely 5. His tear-streaked face pressed into her shoulder, his tiny body trembling with each muffled sob. The linoleum floor was cold against Amara's bare knees, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and made you feel smaller than you already were. Above them, the air crackled with the sharp, venomous voice of their stepmother, Folake. "You think you can just spill milk and walk away?" Folake's voice sliced through the room, each word a lash. A plastic cup clattered to the floor, its contents splattering across the tiles. "Ungrateful brats. You eat my food, sleep under my roof, and this is how you repay me. Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into stories that tug at your heart and spark your spirit. To all my amazing subscribers, thank you for being part of this journey. Your support means the world. If you're new here, we're all about sharing powerful, emotional tales that inspire and connect us. Today, we've got a gripping story that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, so buckle up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of the hope, love, and triumph we bring every week. Let's get into it. Amara's heart thudded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat that drowned out everything but the fear. She tightened her grip on Toby, whispering, "Shoo, it's okay, even though nothing was okay." Her eyes darted to the doorway, praying it would stay empty. Their father, David, wasn't supposed to be home for hours. He was always at the factory, working late shifts to keep the lights on in their cramped Lagos apartment. But Amara wished, with every fiber of her being, that he'd walk through that door right now. Folake's shadow loomed over the table, her footsteps heavy and deliberate. Amara peeked through a crack in the table's edge and saw the woman's hand gripping a thin wooden spoon, the kind that stung worse than it should. Folake's face was a storm, eyes narrowed, lips twisted into a snarl. Her wrapper was tied tightly around her waist, as if holding in her rage. "Amara, come out now," she barked. "Don't make me drag you." Toby whimpered, his fingers digging into Amara's arm. She wanted to be brave for him, to shield him like she always did, but her own fear was a weight pressing down on her chest. She remembered the last time Folake had been this angry, when Toby had accidentally broken a plate, and the welts on Amara's back had taken a week to fade. She'd taken the punishment for him then, too. She always did. "Please, Mummy," Amara said, her voice small but steady as she crawled out from under the table, keeping Toby behind her. "It was an accident. I'll clean it up. Please don't hurt him." Folake's eyes glinted with something dark, something Amara couldn't name but felt in her gut. "You think you can beg your way out of this?" Folake stepped closer, raising the spoon. "You're just like your mother, always thinking you're better than me." The mention of her mother, her real mother, who had died 3 years ago, stung worse than any blow. Amara's memories of her were fading, like a photograph left too long in the sun, but she clung to the warmth of her mother's laugh, the way she'd braid Amara's hair and sing softly. Folake was nothing like her. Folake was sharp edges and cold silences, a stranger who had invaded their home and turned their father into a ghost. Amara braced herself, squeezing her eyes shut as the spoon came down. The crack against her shoulder was a fire that spread through her arm, and she bit her lip to keep from crying out. Toby's sob broke through the air, and Amara's heart shattered. She couldn't let him see this. She couldn't let him think this was normal. "Please, stop," Amara cried, her voice breaking now. "I'll do anything. Just don't touch Toby." Folake laughed, a sound like broken glass. "Anything? You'll learn to respect me, girl. You and that sniveling brother of yours." The spoon rose again, but before it could fall, the front door creaked open. The sound was so unexpected, so out of place, that even Folake froze. Amara's eyes snapped to the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. There, silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway, stood their father, David. His work boots were caked in dust, his face weary but hardening as he took in the scene before him, Amara on her knees, Toby cowering, Folake with the spoon raised like a weapon. "What is this?" David's voice was low, dangerous, a tone Amara hadn't heard in years. It was the voice of the father she remembered from before, the one who used to lift her onto his shoulders and call her his little star. Folake's hand lowered slowly, her expression shifting from rage to something calculated, almost sweet. "David, you're home early," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "I was just disciplining the children. They spilled milk everywhere, Anne." David's eyes locked onto Amara's, and in that moment, she saw something she hadn't seen in years: pain. Guilt. A flicker of the man who used to protect her. But then his gaze shifted to Folake, and Amara's stomach twisted. Would he believe her lies again? Would he walk away, like he always did, leaving them to Folake's mercy? The question hung in the air, heavy as the humid Lagos night pressing against the windows. What would David do now that he'd seen the truth? Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone had to confront a painful truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think David will do next? Amara's shoulder throbbed where the spoon had struck, but she barely felt it now. Her eyes were fixed on her father, David, standing in the doorway of their cramped Lagos apartment. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made the room feel smaller, as if the peeling yellow walls were closing in. Toby clung to her leg, his small hands trembling, his breath hitching in quiet sobs. Amara wanted to scoop him up, to run somewhere far from Folake's sharp tongue and sharper hands, but she stood frozen, waiting for her father's next move. David's face was a map of conflicting emotions: shock, anger, and something deeper, something that looked like shame. He stepped into the kitchen, his work boots leaving faint dust prints on the linoleum. His hands, calloused from years at the factory, flexed at his sides as if he didn't know what to do with them. "Folake," he said, his voice low but steady, "put that spoon down. Now." Folake's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, setting the spoon on the counter with a deliberate clink. "David, you don't understand," she said, her tone softening into something almost pitiful. "These children, they're out of control. I'm only trying to teach them discipline. For their own good." Amara's chest tightened. She'd heard this before, Folake's honeyed lies that twisted the truth until it was unrecognizable. She wanted to scream, to tell her father everything: the late-night punishments, the locked pantry, the way Folake made Toby cry himself to sleep. But fear glued her lips shut. What if he didn't believe her? What if he chose Folake, like he had so many times since their mother died? David's gaze flickered to Amara, and for a moment, their eyes locked. She saw the man she used to know, the one who'd taught her to ride a bicycle in the alley behind their old house, who'd promised her the stars when she was sad. But that man had faded over the years, buried under exhaustion and grief. Amara's deepest desire was simple but felt impossible. She wanted her family back, the one where her father laughed and her mother sang, where Toby didn't flinch at loud voices. Her greatest fear was that it was gone forever, and that she'd lose Toby to Folake's cruelty. "Amara," David said softly, kneeling to her level. His eyes searched hers, and she saw the weight of years in them, years of working double shifts, of trying to hold their fractured family together. "Are you okay?" She nodded, though her throat burned with unsaid words. Toby peeked out from behind her, his wide eyes darting between David and Folake. "Daddy," he whispered, his voice so small it broke Amara's heart all over again. David reached out, pulling Toby into his arms. The boy buried his face in his father's shoulder, and Amara felt a pang of longing. She wanted to be held like that, to feel safe again. But she stood tall, her small frame rigid with the responsibility she'd carried since their mother's death. She was Toby's protector, his shield. She couldn't afford to be weak. Folake crossed her arms, her lips pursing. "David, you're coddling them. They need to learn respect. Your first wife spoiled them, and now look at the mess they are." The mention of her mother was a knife to Amara's heart. She remembered her mother's gentle hands, the way she'd braid Amara's hair while telling stories of brave girls who faced monsters. Amara wanted to be that brave, but courage was hard to find when fear was a constant companion. She glanced at Folake, wondering what secrets hid behind her stepmother's polished exterior. Why did Folake hate them so much? What drove her to lash out when David wasn't home? David stood, still holding Toby, and faced Folake. "We'll talk about this later," he said, his voice firm but tired. "I need to get the kids cleaned up." Folake's eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue. She turned and swept out of the kitchen, her wrapper swishing like a warning. Amara watched her go, a mix of relief and dread settling in her stomach. This wasn't over. It never was. David set Toby down and looked at Amara again. "Come on," he said, gesturing toward the small bathroom down the hall. "Let's get that milk off your clothes." As they followed him, Amara's mind raced. She wanted to trust her father, to believe he'd protect them now that he'd seen Folake's true face. But doubt gnawed at her. David had married Folake 2 years ago, just a year after their mother's death. He'd said it was for them, to give them a new family, but Amara had never felt like Folake's family. She felt like an intruder in her own home. In the bathroom, David wet a cloth and gently wiped Toby's face, his movements careful but distracted. Amara watched him, searching for the father she remembered. "Daddy," she said quietly, "why are you home early?" He paused, the cloth hovering over Toby's cheek. "The factory let us off early today," he said, but there was something in his voice, a hesitation that made Amara's skin prickle. Was he hiding something? Had he known something was wrong, or was it just chance that brought him home in time to stop Folake? Toby tugged at David's sleeve. "Can we go to the park?" he asked, his voice hopeful despite everything. The park was their escape, a place where Amara could push Toby on the swings and pretend, for a little while, that things were normal. David smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe tomorrow, champ," he said. "It's late." Amara's heart sank. She wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but she didn't know how. Instead, she helped Toby dry his hands, her mind swirling with questions. What was her father not telling them? And what would happen when Folake came back? As they left the bathroom, Amara caught a glimpse of herself in the cracked mirror. Her eyes were too old for her 9 years, shadowed with worries no child should carry. She wanted to be brave, to protect Toby and make her father see the truth. But deep down, she was terrified that she wasn't enough. The apartment felt heavier that evening, the humid air clinging to Amara's skin like an unwelcome embrace. After the confrontation in the kitchen, David had ushered the children into their small shared bedroom, closing the door with a soft click that echoed in Amara's mind. Toby curled up on the lower bunk, his thumb in his mouth, a habit he'd outgrown but reverted to in times of stress. Amara sat beside him, stroking his hair, her thoughts a whirlwind. From the living room, muffled voices drifted through the thin walls. David and Folake were arguing, their words sharp but indistinct. Amara strained to listen, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe her father would stand up for them, but doubt crept in like shadows at dusk. What if Folake convinced him it was all a misunderstanding? What if he sent them away? A sudden crash made Amara jump, a glass shattering against the wall, followed by Folake's raised voice. "You never see what's right in front of you, David. Those children are poisoning us." Toby whimpered, and Amara pulled him closer. "It's okay," she whispered, though her voice shook. She needed to do something, but what? At 9, her world was limited to school, chores, and protecting Toby. But tonight, something had shifted. Her father had seen the truth, or at least a glimpse of it. The argument escalated, Folake's words cutting through the door. "If you don't handle this, I will. Maybe it's time they went to live with your sister in the village." Amara's blood ran cold. Aunt Ngozie's village was hours away, a place of mud huts and endless fields, far from their father. The thought of being separated from David, of Toby growing up without him, was unbearable. No, she couldn't let that happen. Pushing down her fear, Amara slipped out of bed and crept to the door. She cracked it open just enough to peer into the hallway. The living room light spilled out, casting long shadows. David stood with his back to her, his shoulders tense. Folake paced, her face flushed. "You're blind, David," Folake spat. "I've been patient, but those kids, they're not mine. And they never will be." David turned, his face weary. "They're my children, Folake. Our children." Amara's heart swelled at his words, but then Folake laughed bitterly. "Our? You think I wanted this? I married you thinking we'd start fresh, but you're still chained to the past." To her. The "her" was Amara's mother, and the pain in Folake's voice was raw, unexpected. For the first time, Amara wondered if Folake's cruelty stemmed from her own hurt. But sympathy was fleeting, the threat was real. Then, the first major twist hit like a thunderclap. Folake stopped pacing and pulled a small envelope from her pocket, slapping it onto the table. "If you won't choose, maybe this will help you decide." David frowned, picking it up. He tore it open, and as he read, his face paled. "What is this?" "A letter from the landlord," Folake said, her voice triumphant. "We're behind on rent. 3 months. If we don't pay by week's end, we're out. And with your factory cutting hours." Amara gasped softly, covering her mouth. The central threat loomed: eviction. They could lose their home. But how? David worked so hard. David crumpled the letter. "How did this happen? I gave you the money every month." Folake's eyes flickered, a hint of guilt. "Things came up. Medical bills, food. You don't understand how expensive it is." Lies, Amara thought. She'd seen Folake buying new wrappers and jewelry, hiding them away. But proving it? That was another matter. David sank into a chair, head in hands. "We could lose everything." Folake knelt beside him, her tone softening. "We can fix this. My brother, he's offered to help. But he says, the kids are a burden. Maybe sending them to Ngozi temporarily." "No." Amara's mind screamed. She had to act. Closing the door quietly, she returned to Toby, who was half asleep. Her decision crystallized: she would confront her father, tell him everything. But fear gripped her. What if he didn't believe her? What if it made things worse? As the argument died down, Amara heard footsteps. The door opened, and David entered, looking older than his years. He sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes meeting Amara's. "We need to talk," he said softly. Amara's pulse raced. This was it, the moment that would change everything. But before she could speak, David dropped the bombshell. "Folake's pregnant." Shock rippled through Amara. A new sibling? But with Folake? The revelation twisted her insides. It explained Folake's mood swings, her desperation. But it also raised the stakes. A new baby meant they might really be sent away. Tears welled in Amara's eyes. "Daddy, please don't send us away." David's face crumpled. "I won't. But things are bad, Amara. I need your help to figure this out." In that moment, an unexpected figure entered the picture, not a romantic interest in the traditional sense, but a spark of connection that would complicate and deepen the story. The door creaked again, and in walked Miss Aisha, their neighbor from across the hall. She was a young teacher, kind and vibrant, with a smile that lit up the dim building. Amara had always admired her, sharing stories during chance encounters. "I heard the noise," Miss Aisha said, her voice concerned. "Is everything okay?" David looked up, surprised. "Aisha? What are you doing here?" She hesitated, glancing at Amara. I worry about the kids. Amara told me some things in confidence." Amara's cheeks burned. She'd confided in Miss Aisha weeks ago, during a moment of weakness. Now, here she was, an unexpected ally, introducing a layer of attraction, not for Amara, but perhaps a subtle, budding respect and connection for David, who had been alone too long. The room tensed. Folake appeared in the doorway, eyes narrowing at Miss Aisha. Who is this? The threat, the decision, the twist, all converged. Amara had to choose, stay silent or speak up, risking everything. Fear mingled with determination. She wouldn't let Folake win. The air in the small bedroom felt stifling, thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Amara stood rooted to the spot, her heart hammering as Miss Aisha's presence shifted the room's dynamic. Folake's eyes burned with suspicion, her lips pressed into a thin line as she glared at the young teacher. David, still seated on the edge of the bed, looked caught between exhaustion and confusion, his gaze flickering between his wife, his children, and the unexpected visitor. Toby clung to Amara's hand, his small fingers trembling. Miss Aisha cleared her throat, her voice steady despite the tension. I didn't mean to intrude, David. But Amara, she's mentioned things about how she and Toby are treated. I couldn't stay silent. Amara's stomach churned. She hadn't meant for Miss Aisha to reveal their talks, not yet. Those moments, stolen in the hallway when Amara helped carry Miss Aisha's books, were supposed to be safe. She'd poured out her fears about Folake's punishments, about the locked pantry and the nights she went hungry so Toby could eat. Now, those secrets were exposed, raw and dangerous. Folake's laugh was sharp, cutting through the silence. This is what you've been doing? Gossiping with neighbors? She turned to David, her tone dripping with accusation. See what I mean? Your daughter's been spreading lies, turning people against me. They're not lies. Amara blurted, her voice shaking but firm. Her hands balled into fists, nails digging into her palms. She couldn't stay silent anymore, not with Folake's threat to send them to the village hanging over them. You hit us, lock us out, take our food. You hate us because we're not yours. The room went still. David's face paled, his eyes searching Amara's. Is this true? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Amara nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I tried to tell you, Daddy. But you're never here. David's shoulders slumped, guilt etching deeper lines into his face. He looked at Folake, waiting for her response. She straightened, her expression a mask of indignation. She's manipulating you, David. She's a child, but she's clever. She wants you all to herself. Miss Aisha stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. I've seen the bruises, David. On Amara's arms, her back. Children don't make that up. The accusation hung in the air, undeniable now. David's gaze hardened, but before he could speak, Folake's face twisted. You believe this stranger over your own wife? A woman who's carrying your child? She placed a hand on her stomach, a calculated move that made Amara's skin crawl. David's jaw tightened, and Amara saw the conflict in his eyes, love for his children warring with the life he'd tried to build with Folake. She wanted to scream, to make him see, but fear held her back. What if he chose Folake's side again? Miss Aisha's presence, though, was a lifeline. Over the past months, Amara had grown to trust her. Their talks in the hallway, the way Miss Aisha listened without judgment, had sparked something in Amara, hope, maybe, or the idea that someone outside their broken family cared. And now, watching Miss Aisha stand up to Folake, Amara felt a flicker of admiration, even attraction to the idea of someone so brave stepping into their mess. For David, too, there was a subtle shift, a spark of respect in his eyes when he looked at Aisha, a woman who saw what he'd been blind to. But the moment was fleeting. Folake's voice cut through again. If you don't trust me, David, then maybe we should all leave. Let your precious children deal with the landlord when we're on the street. The threat of eviction loomed larger now, a shadow over everything. Amara's mind raced. She'd overheard Folake's lies about the rent money, seen the new clothes hidden in her wardrobe. But how could a 9-year-old prove it? The obstacle felt insurmountable, like trying to climb a mountain with no rope. David stood, running a hand through his hair. Nobody's leaving, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We'll figure this out. Together." Folake's eyes glinted with something Amara couldn't read: triumph, maybe, or fear. "Fine," she said. "But don't come crying to me when it all falls apart." She stormed out, the door slamming behind her. In the silence, Miss Aisha knelt beside Amara. "You were so brave," she said softly, her hand resting lightly on Amara's shoulder. The touch was gentle, grounding, and Amara felt a warmth she hadn't known in years. It wasn't just about protection, it was the start of something deeper, a bond forming between them, and perhaps between Aisha and David, though neither seemed to notice it yet. David looked at Aisha, his expression a mix of gratitude and exhaustion. "Thank you," he said. I didn't know it was this bad." "You're here now," Aisha replied, her voice kind but firm. "That's what matters." Amara wanted to believe that, but doubt gnawed at her. She'd seen her father try before, only to retreat into work and silence. And Folake's pregnancy complicated everything. A new baby meant more expenses, more reasons for Folake to push them out. The stakes were higher than ever. The next morning, tension simmered beneath the surface. Folake was quieter, her movements deliberate as she cooked breakfast, her eyes flicking to Amara and Toby with barely concealed resentment. David left for the factory early, promising to talk more when he returned. Amara felt the weight of his absence, the fragility of their hope. At school, Amara's mind wandered. She couldn't focus on math or spelling. Instead, she replayed Folake's words about the rent. A false clue planted itself: maybe Folake was telling the truth, and the money really had gone to bills. But then she remembered the locked box under Folake's bed, the one she'd seen her stepmother open late at night. What was in it? Receipts? Or something else? During recess, Amara confided in her friend Kemi, a bold girl with a knack for sneaking into places she shouldn't. "I need to know what's in that box," Amara whispered, her voice urgent. "It might prove Folake's lying." Kemi's eyes lit up. "We'll sneak in after school. I'll distract her, and you look." The plan was risky, but Amara's determination grew. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for Toby, for their home, for the father she still believed in. But obstacles piled up. What if Folake caught her? What if the box held nothing? And what if Miss Aisha's involvement made things worse, turning Folake's resentment into something uglier? As the school day ended, Amara spotted Miss Aisha waiting by the gate, her smile warm but worried. "I'm checking on you," she said. "And your father asked me to help watch Toby this afternoon." Amara's heart lifted, but suspicion lingered. Was Aisha's kindness genuine, or was there more to her involvement? The question planted a seed of doubt, a red herring that would test Amara's trust. Back home, Kemi's distraction, a fake stomachache, worked long enough for Amara to slip into Folake's room. Her hands shook as she reached under the bed, finding the locked box. But before she could pry it open, footsteps approached. Panic surged. She shoved the box back and hid, her heart pounding. Folake entered, muttering to herself. "They'll see soon enough. They'll all see." Amara's breath caught. What did that mean? The mystery deepened, and with it, the tension. She was closer to the truth, but at what cost? Amara's heart pounded in her ears as she crouched behind the sagging wardrobe in Folake's room, the locked box just out of reach under the bed. The air was heavy with the scent of Folake's lavender perfume, a cloying contrast to the fear gripping Amara's chest. Folake's footsteps stopped inches from the bed, her muttering a low, venomous hum. "They'll see soon enough," she'd said. The words echoed in Amara's mind, a puzzle piece that didn't fit but felt dangerous. The floor creaked as Folake moved away, her voice trailing into the hallway. Amara exhaled shakily, her hands trembling as she crawled out. She had seconds, maybe less. Her fingers brushed the cold metal of the box, but it was locked tight, and she had no key. Frustration burned in her throat, she'd risked so much for nothing. But the thought of Toby, of losing their home, pushed her to keep going. She couldn't give up. Slipping out of the room, Amara found Kemi waiting in the hallway, her eyes wide. "Did you get it?" Kemi whispered. Amara shook her head, her voice barely audible. "It's locked." But she said something weird, like she's planning something. Kemi frowned. "We'll try again tomorrow. I'll bring my brother's hairpin." Amara nodded, but her stomach twisted. Time was running out. The landlord's deadline loomed, and Folake's threat to send them to Aunt Ngozie's village felt more real with every passing hour. Worse, the revelation of Folake's pregnancy had shifted the ground beneath Amara's feet. A new baby meant Folake's hold on their father would tighten, and Amara and Toby could become even more expendable. Back in their bedroom, Toby was coloring on a scrap of paper, his small face scrunched in concentration. Miss Aisha sat beside him, her presence a quiet comfort. She looked up as Amara entered, her eyes searching. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. Amara hesitated. She wanted to trust Miss Aisha, but doubt lingered. Was Aisha really here to help, or was she another complication? Still, the teacher's kindness was a lifeline, and Amara felt a pull toward her, a mix of admiration and the hope of an ally. For David, too, there was a spark, subtle but growing. Amara had noticed the way her father's shoulders relaxed when Aisha spoke, the way his tired eyes softened. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something, a connection born of shared concern for the children. "I'm fine," Amara lied, sitting beside Toby. She didn't want to burden Miss Aisha with her failed mission. But as Toby showed her his drawing, a shaky sketch of their family, with their mother's face half erased by time, Amara's resolve hardened. She had to protect him, no matter what. That evening, David returned from the factory, his face etched with worry. He called Amara and Toby to the living room, where Miss Aisha was still lingering, helping Toby with his homework. Folake was nowhere to be seen, her absence a temporary relief. David sat on the worn couch, his hands clasped tightly. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice heavy. "Things can't go on like this. I've been blind, Amara. I didn't see how bad it was for you and Toby." Amara's heart leapt, but before she could speak, David dropped the bombshell that turned everything upside down. "I went to the landlord today. The rent money, it's gone. Not just late, gone. Folake's been lying about where it went." The words hit like a slap. Amara's suspicions about the locked box, the new clothes, the jewelry, it all clicked into place. But the revelation was bigger than she'd imagined. "What do you mean, gone?" she asked, her voice trembling. David's eyes were haunted. "She's been sending money to her brother. Thousands of naira. I found bank receipts in her purse when I confronted her. She didn't deny it." Amara's mind reeled. Folake had stolen their rent money, their security, to fund her brother? The betrayal cut deep, not just for Amara but for David, who'd trusted his wife to manage their finances. Everything Amara had believed about their struggle, the late shifts, the sacrifices, was built on a lie. Folake hadn't just been cruel, she'd been sabotaging them. Miss Aisha's hand rested on David's arm, a gesture of support that felt intimate, vulnerable. "We'll figure this out," she said, her voice steady. "You're not alone." David looked at her, and for a moment, their eyes held, a shared understanding, a flicker of something deeper. Amara saw it, and though it confused her, it also sparked hope. If Miss Aisha was on their side, maybe they could fight this. But the stakes skyrocketed with David's next words. "The landlord's giving us 3 days to pay, or we're out. I've got some savings, but it's not enough. And Folake, she's threatening to leave if I don't back her up." Amara's chest tightened. Leave? With a baby on the way? Or worse, would she try to take everything, leaving them with nothing? The game had changed. This wasn't just about protecting Toby anymore, it was about saving their family, their home, their future. Toby crawled into David's lap, his small voice breaking the silence. "Are we gonna lose our house, Daddy?" David's face crumpled, and he pulled Toby close. Not if I can help it. Amara felt the weight of their vulnerability, the shared fear binding them. She looked at Miss Aisha, who nodded slightly, as if saying, "We're in this together." The connection between them, Amara, David, Toby, and now Aisha, was fragile but growing, a thread of hope in the chaos. But Folake's return shattered the moment. She stood in the doorway, her eyes cold. "So, you're plotting against me now," she said, her gaze locking onto Aisha. "You think you can just walk into my family?" David stood, his voice firm. "This isn't about Aisha. It's about the truth." Folake's laugh was bitter. "The truth? You want the truth? Fine. My brother's sick. I've been sending money to save him. You do the same for your family." Amara's heart stuttered. Was that true? Another layer of doubt crept in, a red herring that muddied the waters. Folake's brother had never been mentioned before, but the desperation in her voice sounded real. What if she wasn't just a villain? What if she was fighting her own battle? David shook his head. "Why didn't you tell me? We could have worked it out together." Folake's eyes glistened, but she turned away. "You'll never understand." As she left, Amara's mind spun. The locked box, the missing money, Folake's brother, it was all connected, but how? The stakes were higher than ever, and the truth felt just out of reach. The apartment was a tomb of silence the next morning, the kind that pressed against Amara's ears and made every creak of the floorboards feel like a warning. The dim light filtering through the cracked window cast long shadows across the living room, where the remnants of last night's confrontation lingered like a bruise. Amara sat on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, watching Toby play quietly with a worn toy car. His small face was pale, his eyes red from crying himself to sleep. Amara's shoulder still ached from Folake's blow 2 days ago, but the pain in her heart was worse. Everything was falling apart, and she felt powerless to stop it. David hadn't spoken much since Folake's revelation about her brother. He'd left for the factory at dawn, his face a mask of exhaustion and defeat. Amara had wanted to beg him to stay, to fix this, but the words stuck in her throat. Her deepest fear, that she'd lose her father and Toby to Folake's schemes, was clawing at her, and the landlord's 3-day deadline loomed like a storm cloud. They had 2 days left to come up with the money, or they'd be on the street. Folake was in the kitchen, her movements sharp and deliberate as she chopped onions. The knife's rhythmic thud echoed Amara's heartbeat, each slice a reminder of the woman's control over their lives. Amara hadn't dared mention the locked box again, but its existence burned in her mind. If she could just get inside it, she might find proof of Folake's lies, proof that could save them. Miss Aisha had promised to come by again today, but her absence this morning felt like a betrayal. Amara had started to rely on her, on the warmth of her smile and the way she made David seem more like himself. The budding connection between Aisha and David, subtle glances, shared moments of understanding, had given Amara hope that someone else cared enough to fight for them. But what if Aisha pulled away? What if Folake's accusations drove her out? As if summoned by Amara's thoughts, the front door opened, and Miss Aisha stepped inside, her school bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes were tired but determined, and she carried a small stack of papers. "I brought something," she said, setting the papers on the table. "I've been talking to some people at school. There might be a way to help with the rent." Amara's heart lifted, but before she could speak, Folake emerged from the kitchen, her eyes narrowing. "You again," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Haven't you caused enough trouble?" Aisha stood her ground. "I'm here for the children, Folake. And for David. He's carrying too much alone." The mention of David sparked something in Folake's expression, jealousy, maybe, or fear. "You think you can just waltz in and play savior? This is my family." Amara's chest tightened. The tension between Aisha and Folake was a new obstacle, threatening the fragile alliance forming around her and Toby. She wanted Aisha to stay, to help, but Folake's words carried weight. Aisha was an outsider, and Folake was David's wife, pregnant with his child. The romantic connection Amara had sensed between Aisha and David, still unspoken, still tentative, felt like it was slipping away, crushed by Folake's claim. David returned home early, his work boots leaving dust on the floor. He looked at Aisha, then Folake, and finally at Amara and Toby. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice weary. Aisha stepped forward, holding up the papers. "I've got a list of community funds and a contact at the church. They might cover part of the rent if we can prove hardship." Folake snorted. "Charity? We don't need handouts from strangers." David's eyes flickered with hope, but it faded quickly. "It's not enough," he said. "Even with my savings, we're short. And the factory's cutting more hours. I don't know how we'll make it." The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in. Amara's fear crystallized. They were going to lose everything. Her home, her brother, her father's love, all of it was slipping through her fingers. She wanted to scream, to run, but she was trapped. Then Folake delivered the final blow. "I've spoken to my brother," she said, her voice cold. "He's willing to take the kids. Just for a while, until we sort this out." Amara's blood ran cold. Toby's toy car fell from his hand, clattering to the floor. "No!" Amara cried, stepping in front of him. "We're not going anywhere." David's face crumpled. "Folake, we talked about this. They're staying with me." "Are they?" Folake's eyes gleamed with something dangerous. "You can't even keep a roof over their heads. What kind of father lets his children go hungry?" The words cut deeper than any blow. David sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. Amara had never seen him so broken, so defeated. Her father, her protector, was crumbling, and she didn't know how to fix him. Aisha knelt beside him, her voice soft but urgent. "David, you're not alone. We can fight this. Together." But Folake's presence loomed, a wall between them. "You're not part of this family," she snapped at Aisha. "Leave." Aisha hesitated, her eyes meeting David's. For a moment, Amara thought she saw something pass between them, a plea, a promise. But then Aisha stood, her shoulders slumping. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said, her voice breaking. She glanced at Amara, her eyes full of apology, and left. The doors closing felt final, like the end of hope. Amara's deepest fear roared to life. She was alone again, just her and Toby against Folake's wrath. The situation seemed hopeless, the landlord's deadline a guillotine waiting to fall. Even if they found the money, Folake's lies and manipulations would keep tearing them apart. Toby crawled into Amara's lap, his voice a whisper. "Are we gonna be okay?" Amara hugged him tightly, tears burning her eyes. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice cracking. It was the first time she'd been honest with him, and it felt like a betrayal of her role as his protector. As night fell, Amara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The locked box haunted her thoughts. If she could open it, she might find the truth, proof of Folake's theft, or maybe something worse. But getting to it meant risking everything. And with Aisha pushed away, David broken, and Folake's brother looming as a threat, Amara felt the weight of despair settle over her like a shroud. Have you ever felt like hope was slipping away in a moment of crisis? Share your story in the comments. What do you think Amara can do to keep her family together? The morning sun barely pierced the heavy clouds over Lagos, casting a dull glow through the apartment's cracked window. Amara sat on the edge of her bed, her eyes gritty from a sleepless night. Toby slept fitfully beside her, his small body curled into a ball, clutching the tattered blanket their mother had made. The weight of yesterday's despair clung to Amara, but something else stirred beneath it, a spark of defiance. She couldn't let Folake win. Not now, not when they were so close to losing everything. The landlord's deadline was tomorrow, and the threat of being sent to Aunt Ngozie's village loomed larger than ever. Folake's words, her claim about sending money to her sick brother, had planted doubt, but Amara's gut told her it was a lie. The locked box under Folake's bed was the key, she was sure of it. If she could open it, she might find proof of Folake's theft, something to make her father see the truth. David shuffled into the room, his face haggard. He hadn't spoken much since Miss Aisha left last night, driven away by Folake's venom. Amara saw the toll it had taken on him, the guilt, the fear of failing his children. But she also saw something new in his eyes, determination, faint but growing. "Amara," he said, his voice low, "I'm going to the bank today. I need to check the accounts, see if there's anything left we can use for the rent." Amara nodded, her heart lifting slightly. He was trying. But she knew it wouldn't be enough, not unless they exposed Folake's lies. "Daddy," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest, "I think Folake's hiding something. There's a box under her bed. I saw her with it." David's brow furrowed. "A box? What kind?" "It's locked," Amara said. "I tried to open it, but I couldn't. I think it's got proof she took the rent money." David's eyes widened, a flicker of hope breaking through his exhaustion. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was scared," Amara admitted, her voice breaking. "I didn't know if you'd believe me." David knelt before her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I believe you now," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it before. But we're in this together, okay?" The words were a lifeline, pulling Amara from the edge of despair. For the first time in years, she felt her father's strength, the man who'd once promised to protect her and Toby from the world. It wasn't just his words, it was the way he looked at her, like she was his little star again. The door creaked open, and Miss Aisha stepped inside, her face tense but resolute. Amara's heart leapt. She hadn't expected her to return after Folake's outburst. Aisha carried a small envelope, her hand steady despite the weight of Folake's glare from the kitchen doorway. "I couldn't stay away," Aisha said, her eyes meeting David's. "I spoke to the church committee last night. They've agreed to cover half the rent if we can come up with the rest by tomorrow." David's jaw dropped. "Aisha, thank you." His voice cracked, and Amara saw the spark between them reignite, a shared purpose, a deeper understanding born of their fight for the children. It wasn't love yet, but it was a bond, one that gave Amara hope. Folake stepped forward, her arms crossed. "Charity again? You think that solves everything?" Her voice was sharp, but there was a tremor in it, a crack in her usual confidence. Aisha ignored her, turning to Amara. "You're braver than you know," she said softly. "Whatever happens, I'm here." The words ignited something in Amara. She wasn't alone anymore. With David's resolve and Aisha's support, she felt a surge of courage. She had to get into that box, no matter the cost. As Folake retreated to the kitchen, muttering under her breath, Amara whispered her plan to David and Aisha. "Kemi's coming over after school. She's got a hairpin to pick the lock. If we can get Folake out of the house, I can open the box." David hesitated, his protective instincts warring with the need for answers. "It's risky, Amara. If she catches you—" "I know," Amara said. "But we're running out of time. Please, Daddy." David exchanged a look with Aisha, who nodded slightly. "I'll take Folake to the market," Aisha said. "I'll say it's for the baby, to keep her distracted." The plan was set, a fragile thread of hope. Amara's heart raced with fear and determination. This was their chance, the key to solving the central conflict. If the box held proof of Folake's theft, they could confront her, save their home, and keep their family together. As Aisha left to prepare, David pulled Amara and Toby into a hug. "We're going to fix this," he promised. "No matter what." Amara clung to him, tears pricking her eyes. For the first time, she believed him. The darkness of the past days was still there, but a light had broken through. They were united, and that gave her the strength to face what came next. Have you ever found hope in a moment when everything seemed lost? Share your experience in the comments. What do you think Amara will find in the box? The afternoon sun hung low over Lagos, its heat pressing against the apartment's cracked windows. Amara's hands trembled as she crouched in Folake's bedroom, the locked box now in front of her on the faded rug. Kemi stood guard at the door, her eyes darting toward the hallway where Miss Aisha had taken Folake to the market under the pretense of buying baby supplies. David was at the bank, scrambling to piece together what little savings he had left. The landlord's deadline was tomorrow, and this was Amara's last chance to uncover the truth that could save their home. Toby sat cross-legged beside her, clutching his toy car like a talisman. "Are we gonna be okay, Amara?" he whispered, his voice small but hopeful. She forced a smile, her heart aching for him. "We will," she said, praying it wasn't a lie. She'd promised to protect him, and now, at 9 years old, she was about to face the biggest test of her courage. Kemi's hairpin scraped against the lock, a soft metallic click echoing in the quiet room. Amara's breath caught with each attempt, her mind racing. What if the box was empty? What if Folake caught them? But the memory of Folake's cruelty, her blows, her lies about the rent money, fueled her resolve. She'd learned to be brave, to trust her instincts, and to lean on the people who cared, David, Aisha, even Kemi. They were her strength now. The lock clicked open, and Amara's heart leapt. She lifted the lid, revealing a stack of papers, a small wad of Naira notes, and a leather-bound notebook. Her fingers shook as she pulled out the papers, bank statements, receipts, and a letter. The statements showed transfers to an account labeled Emeka, Folake's brother. Thousands of Naira, siphoned from David's earnings. The receipts were for jewelry, wrappers, and a phone, not medical bills. Folake's lie about her sick brother unraveled in Amara's hands. But the notebook held the most shocking twist. Amara opened it, her eyes scanning Folake's tight handwriting. It wasn't just a record of expenses, it was a plan. Entries detailed how she'd been saving to leave David, to start over with her brother in Abuja. "The kids are a burden," she'd written. "Once the baby's born, I'll take what's mine and go." Amara's blood ran cold. Folake wasn't just stealing, she was planning to abandon them, to take David's child and leave them homeless. The betrayal was worse than Amara had imagined, but it also lit a fire in her. This was the proof they needed. "Kemi, we've got it," Amara whispered, her voice trembling with triumph. "This proves everything." Kemi grinned, but her expression faltered. "Amara, someone's coming." Footsteps thudded in the hallway, too heavy to be Aisha's. Amara's heart sank. Folake. She shoved the notebook and papers into her shirt, slammed the box shut, and pushed it under the bed. "Hide," she hissed, pulling Toby behind the wardrobe. Kemi ducked under the bed just as Folake burst in. "What are you doing in here?" Folake's voice was a whip, her eyes blazing as she scanned the room. Amara's heart pounded so loudly she was sure Folake could hear it. The papers felt like a burning weight against her skin. I was looking for Toby's toy," Amara stammered, stepping out to face her. Toby clung to her leg, his eyes wide with fear. Folake's gaze narrowed, landing on the slightly askew rug. "You little thief," she snarled, stepping closer. "You've been in my things, haven't you?" Amara's knees shook, but she stood her ground, channeling every ounce of courage she'd built over the past days. "I know what you did," she said, her voice steady despite the fear. "You took Daddy's money. You're lying about your brother." Folake's face twisted, a mix of shock and fury. "You don't know what you're talking about, you insolent child." But before she could advance, the front door opened, and David's voice cut through the tension. "Amara? Folake?" He stepped into the room, Aisha close behind, her face pale but resolute. David's eyes widened as he took in the scene, Amara's defiance, Folake's rage, Toby's trembling form. "What's going on?" David demanded. Amara seized her moment, pulling the papers and notebook from her shirt. "Daddy, look," she said, thrusting them into his hands. "She's been stealing from us. She's planning to leave you." David's hands shook as he read, his face hardening with each page. Folake's expression faltered, her bravado crumbling. "David, it's not what it looks like," she stammered. "I was just—" "Enough," David said, his voice like steel. "You've been lying to me. To us. All this time." Folake's eyes darted to Aisha, then back to David. "You're going to believe a child over me? I'm carrying your baby." David's jaw clenched, but his gaze was unwavering. "This isn't about the baby. It's about trust. And you've broken it." Aisha stepped forward, her presence steadying Amara. "David, the church money is ready. If we can cover the rest, we can keep the apartment." David nodded, his eyes still on Folake. "I found a small loan at the bank. It's enough, with the church's help." He turned to Amara, his voice softening. "You did this, Amara. You saved us." Tears welled in Amara's eyes, but they were tears of relief, of triumph. She'd faced her fear, confronted the monster in their home, and come out stronger. Toby ran to her, hugging her tightly, and she felt his trust in her, unbreakable. Folake's shoulders slumped, defeat written in her posture. "Fine," she said, her voice hollow. "Do what you want. But don't expect me to stay." She turned to leave, but David's voice stopped her. "You'll get help, Folake. For the baby's sake. But not here. Not like this." The final twist was Folake's surrender, not to redemption, but to the truth. She walked out, leaving the notebook and her lies behind. Amara watched her go, a mix of relief and pity stirring in her chest. Folake was broken in her own way, but Amara's family was stronger. David pulled Amara and Toby into his arms, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you," he said. Aisha stood nearby, her smile warm, her presence a quiet promise of support. The bond between her and David, forged through this crisis, was stronger now, a foundation for something new. Amara felt the weight lift, the fear replaced by hope. They'd faced the worst and won, not just their home, but each other. The morning after Folake's departure, the Lagos apartment felt different, lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching flecks of dust that danced in the air. Amara sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the familiar chips in the wood, now free of the tension that had haunted it for so long. Toby was beside her, humming softly as he colored a new picture, a bright sketch of their family, this time with David, Amara, Toby, and a smiling figure that looked suspiciously like Miss Aisha. The sight warmed Amara's heart, a reminder of how far they'd come. David bustled in the kitchen, frying yam slices for breakfast. The sizzle and aroma filled the room, a stark contrast to the burnt toast days of Folake's reign. His shoulders were straighter, his eyes brighter, as if uncovering Folake's betrayal had lifted a weight he'd carried too long. Amara watched him, marveling at the father she'd rediscovered, the one who laughed, who protected, who saw her. The landlord had been paid, a combination of David's loan, the church's contribution, and a small fundraiser Miss Aisha had organized with her students' families. The threat of eviction was gone, their home secure. But more than that, Amara felt a deeper security. Her family was whole again, stitched together by courage and truth. Miss Aisha arrived just as breakfast was ready, her knock soft but confident. She wore a simple blue dress, her smile as warm as the morning sun. "Smells amazing," she said, setting a basket of mangoes on the table. "A gift from my students." David grinned, a rare lightness in his expression. "You're spoiling us, Aisha." She laughed, her eyes meeting his, and Amara caught the spark between them, subtle, unspoken, but undeniable. The romantic connection that had begun as shared concern for the children had grown into something deeper, rooted in mutual respect and vulnerability. It wasn't a fairy tale love, not yet, but it was real, a promise of new beginnings. Amara felt a quiet joy at the thought of Aisha becoming part of their lives, not as a replacement for her mother, but as a new kind of family. As they ate, David addressed the lingering questions. Folakes with her brother in Abuja, he said, his voice steady. She called last night. She's getting help, counseling, for the baby's sake. I'll make sure she's taken care of, but she won't be back. Amara nodded, a mix of relief and pity settling in her chest. Folakes' actions had been cruel, but her notebook had revealed her own pain, grief for a life she'd wanted but couldn't have, resentment at being a stepmother. Amara didn't forgive her, not fully, but she understood a little more. It was a small closure, but enough. What about the baby? Toby asked, his voice small. David reached for his hand. The baby's your sibling, champ. We'll figure it out together. You're not going anywhere. Toby's smile was brighter than Amara had seen in months. She felt her own heart lift, the fear of being sent to Aunt Ngozie's village fading like a bad dream. They were staying, all of them, in the home where her mother's memories still lingered in the corners. Amara's growth was evident in the way she carried herself now. She was still 9, still small, but her eyes held a quiet strength. She'd faced her fears, Folakes' wrath, the risk of losing her family, and come out stronger. She'd learned to trust, to speak up, to fight for what mattered. And she'd seen her father change, too, from a man lost in grief to one who fought for his children. Aisha's role was cemented as they cleared the table together. She listened as Amara talked about school, her dreams of becoming a teacher one day, just like Aisha. You'd be a great one, Aisha said, her voice warm. You're already so brave. The words settled in Amara's heart, a seed for the future. She imagined herself standing in front of a classroom, telling stories like her mother used to, helping kids like her and Toby. It was a dream that felt possible now, in a home filled with love instead of fear. As the day unfolded, they went to the park, a promise David had kept. Toby ran to the swings, laughing as Amara pushed him higher. David and Aisha sat on a nearby bench, their conversation easy, their laughter mingling with the children's. Amara watched them, her heart full. This was what family felt like, not perfect, but real. The loose ends were tied up in the quiet moments. Kemi stopped by later, her grin wide as she hugged Amara. You're a hero, she said, and Amara blushed, feeling the weight of her friend's pride. The locked box, the notebook, the confrontation, it had all led to this moment, where truth had won. As dusk fell, Amara stood on the balcony, looking out at the bustling Lagos street below. The city was loud, chaotic, but it was home. She felt her mother's presence in the breeze, a whisper of approval. She'd protected Toby, saved their family, and found her own strength. And with David and Aisha by her side, the future felt bright, full of hope and new beginnings. What's a moment when you found hope and love after a long struggle? Share your story in the comments. How do you think Amara's family will grow from here?
Wow, what a journey that was. Thank you so much, my incredible community, for sticking with us until the very end. Your support lights up our world. If this story touched your heart, drop a comment below and let us know what moved you most. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you never miss our next emotional adventure like the one popping up on your screen right now. Click it to keep the stories flowing. Until next time, keep spreading love and hope. See you in the next video.